So the Communicating Your Science webinar series is a program of the Graduate Center Science Communications Academy. So I'm Josephine Peterson. I am the program coordinator for the CUNY Advanced Science Research Center Illumination Space Hub. And that's a mouthful, but it is the Illumination Space Hub is the science and STEM outreach and education program of the Advanced Science Research Center of the Graduate Center. And the Science Communication Academy is one of the programs of the Illumination Space Hub. So every month we hold a program, a webinar for scientists and students in the CUNY system to discuss ways to best disseminate your scientific information, your scientific work and publications, and utilizing different platforms, different technologies. The CUNY ASRC Illumination Space Hub, ASRC again is Advanced Science Research Center, as I said, is that collective space for all of our communication, outreach, and education. And you'll see there is our website for the Illumination Space Hub. And you can visit that website, which I will put in the chat, to check out our forthcoming webinars and events. I do have information about next month's event that I will give you the registration information for at the end of our session today. So if you want to hold up until that, and I'll give you information on how to register there. But first, let me just drop that link in the chat. Okay. So today, we are so pleased to have Meg Wacha. We have two speakers today. I'm going to read a short bio about them both. So we have Meg Wacha, who's a University Scholarly Communications Librarian. Meg advances equitable access to information and publishing systems through their dual roles in libraries and the Wikimedia movement. During the day, Meg serves as the University Scholarly Communications Librarian in CUNY's Central Office of Library Services, where they lead open research scholarly communication initiatives across CUNY's 25 colleges and 31 libraries. On nights and weekends, Meg is an active Wikipedian and the president of Wikimedia NYC, a volunteer-run nonprofit that connects New York with Wikipedia, Wikimedia, and the larger free culture movement. They serve on advisory boards for LIS Scholarship Archive, Wikimedia DC, CUNY Academic Commons, International Open Access Week, and the US Repository Network. We also have, I realized that Jill, I made an error with your name there. We have Jill Cirasella, so sorry about that. And Jill is the Associate Librarian for Scholarly Communication at the CUNY Graduate Center, as well as a subject librarian for several sciences. Jill leads the GC Scholarly Communication Initiatives, promotes open scholarship across campus, and contributes to the university-wide scholarly communication efforts. Committed to advancing ethical open access initiatives, especially fee-free open access journals, she recently wrapped up 3 years as chair of the editorial board of the Journal of Librarianship and Scholarly Communication, and is currently co-founding the Journal of Graduate Librarianship. So we are so pleased to have Jill and Megan here today, and I will hand it over to them to share their screens and give the presentation.
Thank you so much, Josephine. And I will just go ahead and share my screen. Jill will kick things off.
Great, thank you. So yes, I am Jill Cirasella, and this again is the link that we shared in the chat, which takes you directly to the screen where you can sign up for a CUNY Academic Works account. So if you had a chance to do that before we got started, great. If you didn't, we'll share the link again at the end. Next slide. So our presentation today is CUNY Academic Works, a tool for sharing your research with the general public. And that all sounds vague and not so very meaningful right now, but I hope in 40 minutes or so, it'll be much clearer what we mean when we say that. Next slide. So,
During today's webinar, as a reminder, this is being recorded, so we encourage you to keep yourself muted when you are not speaking. And if you have any privacy concerns or just aren't feeling quite yourself today, please feel free to turn off your camera and or rename yourself, whatever supports a comfortable Zoom webinar experience for you. And also we encourage you that if you have a question, please add it to the chat. It is being monitored and there will be time for questions at the end of today's webinar. So just add them in as they come up for you. Now, coming into this conversation, Jill and I both recognize that there are a lot of myths out there about open access. Ideas like, in order to make my work open, I have to publish in an open journal, or I have to pay a fee. Sometimes there is a belief that open access publications are of lower or lesser quality. But in reality, and over the course of the last 20+ years, a number of studies have shown that open access journals typically don't charge an article processing charge or an APC in order to make a work publicly accessible. In fact, I believe it's 70% of journals that will make an article open access charge no fees to their authors. And open access journals, just like paywalled journals, range in quality. There are low quality open access journals. There are also open access journals that are the top tier in their field. And perhaps most importantly and most pertinent to today's conversation, open access journals aren't the only way to share your work openly online. No matter where you publish, whether it's in an open access journal, a paywalled journal, or what's referred to as a hybrid journal that is part open and part paywalled, you as an author, as a researcher, have the ability to share the results of your research in a public access repository. Now, for the purposes of today, when we talk about open access, we mean access and ideally use of information without financial, legal, or technical barriers. So this is really an access model, right? It means folks can read it for free online, not a business model. And our understanding of open access comes from 3 separate declarations that were made way back in 2001. So this is very much, the movement is now a little bit over 20 years old. And I often like to return to one of those declarations, the Budapest Open Access Declaration, which still has resonance today. And in this, a group of researchers essentially declared that they would take the old tradition of scholars making their works available for the purposes of scientific inquiry and accelerating the pace of scientific discovery with the new technology of the internet in order to achieve an unprecedented public good. One that would accelerate the rate at which research could be produced, and one that would ultimately make the research as useful as it can be. Because open research is better research. It's better science. It advances at a quicker pace, yes, but it also means more researchers contributing to the process. By sharing one's data, results can be replicated or flagged if that's not possible. And this is why we're seeing entities like the White House, UNESCO, and the larger United Nations recognize open as a means for addressing the major issues of our time, developing recommendations to address the fragmented scientific and policy environment with a global understanding of the meaning, opportunities, and challenges that open brings. So it's a while back now, but it's still burned into my brain, this article from the New York Times from way back, and I think it was 2016, which described a group of researchers who were not so much rogue as they were committed to advancing the pace of discovery, particularly in light of the Zika virus. So they shared their preprints online in a new repository called bioRxiv before submitting them through more traditional journal channels, which would slow their release by months or even years. And hosted by Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, this same repository, bioRxiv, has gained a lot of attention as it's become the primary site for scientists to share the results of their research on COVID-19, raising, yes, the need for a more critical eye from the public record, and honestly, most journalists, but also leading to more rapid forms of peer review outside of the 1 to 3 year process typical of so many journals. 3 years in which the work might not have been available for other researchers to read and sometimes disprove, but more often build upon, allowing us again to advance the pace of scientific progress, the development of treatments, and ultimately a vaccine. And the big publishers could not argue with this. And so in response to this shared global crisis, publishers began to temporarily make the results of COVID-19 research publicly accessible online, removing that paywall that so often serves as a barrier to our students, but also to our peers within our respective fields. And so it's no surprise that when the monkeypox virus began to emerge, that the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy quickly issued a call for public access to monkeypox-related research and the data that underlies it. But public access isn't just for pandemics. No matter what your field is, public access allows you to make a difference and to increase the impact of your research. Some publishers will make articles freely available, but it's often up to you as an individual to share your work online, ensuring that it has the widest possible audience and potentially even boosting your citation count. Now, since Tim Berners-Lee launched and others launched the World Wide Web in 1991, scholars have been using the web to openly share their works online, starting first with the preprint archive in physics called Archive in 1991, but since that time emerging into all other sorts of disciplines. So we have bioRxiv, sociarchive, of course, PubMed, run by the National Institutes of Health, and a mandatory site to deposit federally funded research. And I will pass this to Jill.
3 years in, and I still can't remember to unmute. So many publishers allow individual authors to post their work, their published articles, or the manuscript version of them to various repositories like the ones Meg was just describing. Many authors themselves desire to or choose to post their work to sites like ResearchGate and academia.edu. And these sites actively encourage authors to do this. But something that's really important to know about these sites is both ResearchGate and academia.edu are for-profit sites funded by venture capital. And so their biggest interest is making a profit and not getting sued for lots of money. So when publishers who generally do not allow authors to post to these sites, when publishers send takedown notices to these sites, which they do, the sites just comply. They don't want to get sued, they comply. And so you can see I have two little headlines on this slide, one where academia.edu was slammed with a massive takedown notice from the publisher Elsevier, and another one where ResearchGate removed 200,000 articles after a massive wave of takedown notices. And so while it might seem like a good idea to share your work on these sites where, yes, there is community there. There are a lot of people sharing work there, looking at work there. It's important to know that most of the time that is not in compliance with publishers' policies, unlike those repositories Meg was describing. And that also it is, if you're interested in the long-term accessibility of your work, there is no guarantee that anything you post there will be there 5 years from now or even tomorrow, because they are so compliant with these takedown notices that are sent by the publishers. So you might think, well, people are posting their articles for free. People are accessing the articles for free. You said these are for-profit sites. Like, what's their profit model? And basically, it's selling users' data. It's tracking how everybody behaves on that site, and like parsing and crunching that data in various ways and selling it. So in the same ways that many of us feel a little like icky about how our behavior on sites like Facebook are monitored, the same kind of monitoring of our behaviors and actions and clicks are happening on these sites. And then also, what's their future? So yes, something you upload could come down with no warning because of a takedown notice, but it's also the case that these like venture capital funded startups typically exist to be sold. And when they are sold, what's going to happen? The purchaser may keep them running. They may turn them into something drastically different. They may kind of chop them up and sell them for parts. They may cease to exist as they currently are. So for all of these reasons, the reasons having to do with publishers' policies, but also reasons having to do with long-term accessibility and distasteful things being done with the data about people's behaviors on the site, things that you might feel uncomfortable as invasions of your privacy. All of these are reasons to probably not engage so much with academia.edu or ResearchGate. And it is worth noting, academia.edu got that URL before it was really cracked down on about who could get domain names ending with .edu. They would not now be able to get it, but they got it quite early on, and they've really been able to capitalize on having that .edu at the end of their name. Okay, next slide. So also, there are personal websites, and publishers do often allow authors to post your article to a personal website or a personal page on your institutional website. And with all of these options we're discussing, the permission is for you individually as an author. So if I publish an article with a given publisher, they will say, okay, you, Jill, if you want to upload your article in one of these ways, you can do that. If I think Meg wrote a really good article and I want to put it on my website, I am not allowed to do that. This permission is just for the authors themselves. And so that's a big part of the reason we're doing this presentation, because it's really important to understand that the rights that publishers give regarding posting online are specifically for the authors. And so it is on you as the author, when you author an article, to exercise those rights that you have. So personal websites, yes, publishers do often allow you to post there, and that is a good step. But there is still that problem with long-term accessibility. No matter what your intentions are about keeping your personal website, up and running for decades, at some point, some inevitable point, your website will cease to exist. Similarly, you might have a long career at a given institution, but at some point, your career at that institution will end, and your personal website or personal profile on that institution's website will no longer be there. So while it's a good step toward openness to post on personal websites, institutional websites, it is also not permanent. And also, these sites don't, especially personal websites, don't tend to be crawled very well by Google Scholar or library search tools. And so the works that you might post there are not very discoverable by other people. And therefore, it's not the best option. So next slide. So Meg was talking about some of the disciplinary repositories, which are great places to share work. But today's topic is about CUNY's repository. Many institutions offer their own repositories that really are intended to be destination for the works of their community for long-term, ongoing access, preservation, dissemination. So at CUNY, our repository is called CUNY Academic Works. Next slide. So what is CUNY Academic Works? This is a quote, just bear with me. CUNY Academic Works is a service of the CUNY libraries, that's why we librarians are here, dedicated to collecting and providing access to the research, scholarship, and creative and pedagogical work of the City University of New York. In service to CUNY's mission as a public university, content in academic works is freely available to all. So that is a mouthful. And the too long didn't read version of it is that CUNY Academic Works is CUNY's public access repository. Next slide. So what can go into CUNY Academic Works? Any of you who might be doctoral students probably know that your dissertation is going to end up in CUNY Academic Works, but dissertations are not the only things that go there. Journal articles can go there. Books and book chapters can go there. Other things that maybe weren't formally published, working papers or reports can be uploaded there. Data sets can be uploaded there. Conference presentations, whether those presentations were papers or slideshows or posters, they can all be uploaded there. And then also if you create works for your instructional work that you are interested in sharing with the world, those would be open educational resources, and those can be shared there. So those are the big categories, but really any form of scholarly, pedagogical, or creative work can be uploaded by you, if you're the author of the work, to CUNY Academic Works. Next slide.
So why should you submit to CUNY Academic Works? We're already doing so many things. We have papers to grade, dinner to make. Why should you take the 5 to 10 minutes to go and add your paper? Well, sometimes it's required, not by CUNY, but as many of you know, for a number of years now, federal funding agencies such as the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, and others have required that if your work is publicly funded, so if you receive a grant from the NIH, the NSF, and other federal funding agencies, that your work is made publicly accessible. Sometimes they designate a repository such as PubMed, and sometimes it is a bit more open. And so Academic Works may serve as a site. And what is perhaps less well known is that within the last 6 months, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy has expanded that directive to all federal funding agencies. It used to be just the largest, but now all federally funded research will be mandated to be made openly available. But more importantly, when you submit a work to an open access repository, and especially to CUNY Academic Works, users can find it wherever they are. And that has distinct effects within the life of your work after its publication. When it comes down to it, everyone benefits from making a work openly accessible. Students have access to the works they need when they are in our classrooms and after they graduate from our institutions. So, when I think about concepts like lifelong learning, which we talk about a lot, there was a study done by Project Information Literacy, which surveyed 2,000 students from 10 institutions, R1 to community colleges, and they asked them how they were finding and using resources in their personal and professional lives, right? Because so many of them are conducting, that search in Google or in Google Scholar, and they're hitting the paywall, asking them to pay $20, $30, $50 for an article before they even know whether or not they want to read it. And so these students surveyed, 73% of them were finding it difficult to locate affordable sources, no surprise. Half of them were frustrated because they had lost access to their library's databases. And 27% of them were using open access repositories like CUNY Academic Works in their professional lives, right? So open access also benefits our peers in the research community and other readers, regardless of their affiliation or their ability to pay. This includes our students, Wikipedians, where I spend a lot of my time, as well as researchers at nonprofit public health organizations, and your doctor. Open access also benefits the author and their work. By making a work openly accessible, it is shared with those that can't access it, which can lead to further collaboration and opportunities. It provides increased visibility via search engines, and work is read more, it's cited more. So this graph clearly shows what's often referred to as the citation advantage for research that's been made openly available over that which lives behind a paywall, which is the blue line below. And there have been a number of studies done in this area, and review articles have shown that the advantage does vary by the quality of the research as well as the discipline, but that by making a work publicly accessible, citations of that work can increase sometimes by up to 600%. And open access works are more visible to journalists and, the wider public, right? There are many examples of this here at CUNY. I always like to share the experiences of people I know. It makes it much more tangible to me. And so I was really excited, for instance, when a dissertation from a former student at the CUNY Graduate Center was cited by a journalist, in this case, in an Atlantic article about marginalized families being pushed out of PTAs. Works in academic works have been, picked up and transformed into publicly accessible research, into publicly accessible language by media outlets such as the New York Times, Time Magazine, and many other publications, which really make it more accessible to the public, right? Because when they are reading those news articles, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to go and read the research that it's also based upon, especially in this age of mis and disinformation. It's an incredibly important practice to encourage. And as I said, these works are also being picked up by Wikipedians. A number of different works have been cited on Wikipedia, and this not only means that there is a wider audience for the research. Wikipedia and its sister projects in the Wikimedia movement are viewed 16 billion times each month, which translates out to 6,000 visits every second of every day. But Wikipedia also serves as one of the top 10 traffic drivers for DOIs. So for published journal articles that have a digital object identifier, Wikipedia is one of the primary sites where people find that research. Here at CUNY, we're also finding that folks are, finding, creative ways to integrate academic works into their established workflows. So the CUNY Urban Food Policy Institute, based at the School of Public Health, works across disciplines and sectors to make the food system just, healthy, and resilient, an issue that is always of vital importance to New Yorkers, but especially so during the pandemic. So they don't just post their reports, right, their gray literature to their website, right? They upload it to Academic Works as well, right, linking to it from their website. So that this report on, New York Food 2020, really looking at recommendations during COVID-19 and beyond as it relates to food security, has been downloaded by a number of different users in 18 different countries, with the most attention and the most downloads coming not just from New York State, but specifically from the New York State Health Foundation. Right? So there are always a lot of different actors. We never really know what that second life of our work is going to be, right? So it is often used to inform practitioners like our doctors, nurses, and public policy. For instance, these two articles on, birthing Blackness in the body, Black midwives and experiential continuities of institutional racism, another on traumatic brain injuries among adolescent inmates in Rikers. Both have received a great deal of attention from employees at New York City Health and Hospitals, right? Research in CUNY Academic Works more broadly receives a lot of attention from NYC-based medical providers, the Department of Education, Department of Veteran Affairs, the New York City Unified Court System. All of these entities are some of the top users of the repository.
And what's really wonderful is when we get information, you know, qualitative information separate from these counts from readers themselves. So every item in Academic Works has a cover page on it. And at the bottom of every cover page is a link that says, how does access to this work benefit you? Let us know. And of course, the vast majority of people who run across works in Academic Works are busy, they're in a rush, they don't see it, they don't click the link. But you know, some do, and honestly, more than I expected. And so I gathered a few examples of the feedback that's come in. And Meg, if you want to go to the next slide, I just wanted to share a few. And so the first three are really interesting to me because they are not coming from academic researchers, it seems. Helps me learn how there are still systems in place that perpetuate injustice. When I discuss the matter, I have a public, reliable source to cite and help educate other people close to me on the matter. And the next one says, this is amazing. I'm eternally grateful as a high school student to be able to access this information, especially in times of surveillance of the police on the people. And that is really so meaningful to us and to the authors that these readers are writing in. And whenever we get this feedback, we forward it to the author. And we often hear back from the authors about how touched they are, how moved they are, how pleased they are, that to know that their work is having an impact. And so finally, the third bullet on this page is, I'm conducting a study on this topic in an attempt to convince my kids not to post their lives online. So we don't know if that's from a parent or from a K through 12 teacher, but I think it's really interesting. Somebody really trying to research the subject about what happens when you put all the information about yourself online so that they can help educate kids about it. Next slide. Here are just a few more. This first one I love. I'm researching the issue in order to prepare myself to speak to the general public and state assembly persons and other key players in the effort to pass legislation to raise the pay and benefits of all home care workers. So here's an example of where research that's in CUNY Academic Works is being used in the argumentation that's being brought to the legislature. Somebody really contrasting it with the state of affairs coming from publishers. Thank you for making this work publicly available instead of locking it behind a paywall like many other publications. And then I'm including these two that came in different languages, which shows it really is a global reach. The first one is in French, and I believe they're saying that it's a subject of a memoir about burnout. There is a researcher at CUNY who's at City College in the Graduate Center who does a lot of research about burnout, and this was a comment about that. And the second one is in Portuguese, where my Portuguese is worse than my French, but it basically says it's very important for my scientific understanding. Thank you. And so the fact that they were accessing these works from other countries and taking the time to write to us in their language about how works coming from CUNY help them is really meaningful. But of course, it's also helpful to know numbers. Next slide. And so we can help there as well. As soon as you have works in CUNY Academic Works, then you will start to get a monthly readership report by email from the repository. And so the email is very simple. It will say, you got this many, your works got this many new downloads this month, bringing your total number of downloads to X. But then there's a link to your dashboard. And that brings you to an author dashboard on the back end of the repository in your account, where there's a whole lot of additional information. And on the dashboard, you can see the number of downloads, which is often referred to as alt metrics. There's a form of alt metrics to contrast it with research metrics that people often talk about, such as citation counts and journal impact factors. But just downloads themselves are also meaningful. It's evidence of impact and influence. So you can see the number of downloads by items. So if you have numerous works in Academic Works, you can see which ones are getting cited the most. By month, so you can see trends over time, again, by geographic location, by the downloader's institution, and by referring website. So for example, if a lot of hits are coming to your work from Google Scholar in India, it will reflect that. You can see the different flavors of Google that are bringing people to your works. Next slide. Back to you,
Jill. So sharing your work openly online really allows your work to be read, right? You write your work to be read and you have a right to be read. And there are many individuals that, without taking additional actions beyond submitting to CUNY Academic Works, use it to boost their scholarly profile online. So for instance, one of the wonderful things about CUNY Academic Works, as we've talked about, is that unlike a personal website, it really works with the, somewhat, hidden behind a curtain, the black box algorithms of Google and Google Scholar. So that Shelley Eversley at Baruch College, for instance, who does have a Google Scholar profile because she has created one, but if someone is searching for works by Shelley Eversley, they can not only see what she's written, but they can also have access to the works themselves. So in this example, right, we can see that one of her works, The Lunatic's Fancy and the Work of Art, is available via JSTOR, but Female Iconography and the Invisible Man is available directly from CUNY Academic Works. So that if a user, without being logged in, without being on CUNY's campus, without anything, selects PDF from cuny.edu, this is the page that they come to, right? They come to the free to read version. And this is actually how most of our readers come to the repository. They don't see the repository itself, right? But 80% of our readers come directly to the PDF, either via Google or Google Scholar. There are also a lot of tools that integrate with various open access resources to make them more visible. So Unpaywall, for instance, is, I can highly recommend it as a widget to add into your browser. It's a database of tens of millions of academic articles from over 50,000 publishers and repositories, which makes it super easy to track and use content. So if I am on the publisher's website, right, I am going to be asked to pay $42 to download this article. But because I have the Unpaywall browser extension installed, this little green button appears on the side of my screen, and that indicates that an openly available version is available. So I can click that, and I'm immediately brought to the version available via CUNY Academic Works.
Okay, so with any luck, we have convinced you or begun to convince you that it might be worth your while to submit your works to Academic Works. And we could just say, go forth and do it and assure you that it's easy to do. But we want to take you through the steps so that you can really understand what you should be doing and not feel worried about how challenging or tricky it might be, because it really isn't. Next slide. So step by step. First, go to academicworks.cuny.edu, which is just the front page of CUNY Academic Works. Next slide. Second step, in the top menu bar, there's a My Account link. You can click that, and then if you have an account, log into it. If you don't have an account, create it and then log into it. And then again, in the chat, we have that direct link right to that account creation page. Next slide. Okay, so once you're logged in, over on the left-hand side, you will see a link that says Submit Work. And you should be taken to a page where you see all of the different sections or series of CUNY Academic Works. And assuming that most people at an ASRC webinar are affiliated with the ASRC, you would click the Advanced Science Research Center link to get taken to the submission page for works to go into the ASRC section of Academic Works. So once you click that, you will be asked to, quote unquote, sign the submission agreement. In this case, checking the checkbox qualifies as signing. And what you're asked to agree to there is that you are the copyright holder or have the permission of the copyright holder to share the work. So maybe you've signed your copyright over to the publisher, but they give you permission to share it, which most publishers do for some version or another of the article. And then it also gives CUNY the right to share your work via CUNY Academic Works. If CUNY wants to do anything else with your work, they have to go back to you and ask for your permission. So you're just giving this very limited permission to distribute it in CUNY Academic Works. So we don't want you to worry that this might, unleash your work to be used in all sorts of ways by the university that you're not comfortable with. That is not the case. It would simply be giving permission to share on CUNY Academic Works. Next slide. Okay, and then it asks you to provide some basic metadata about the article, title, the authors, what kind of document it is, if it's an article, for example, and then importantly, the abstract of the article. The reason why that is so important is because Google scholars like clever matching algorithm to say, okay, here is the paywalled version of this article, and now we see that this is a freely accessible version of that article. That largely depends on the abstract of the paywalled version matching the abstract of the freely available version. So please do put your abstract in, and then there's an opportunity to add some comments if you want to, or if the publisher requires you to add a comment about where the work was initially published, for example. Next slide. And then from there, you click to upload the file from your computer, and then you click submit. Next slide. And after approval, it will go live in CUNY Academic Works. But I want to be very clear that approval is not scrutiny by those of us who manage CUNY Academic Works. It's simply looking to make sure that the file came through properly and that the metadata matches the file. So we just check to make sure that everything is in order, and then we approve it and it goes live. And shortly thereafter, it becomes findable via Google and Google Scholar. Unlike personal websites, as I mentioned, Academic Works works so well with Google Scholar, and that's a huge part of the reason that works in CUNY Academic Works have been accessed over 10 million times and almost 3 million times in the past year. And that access, next slide, really comes from every state and every country. And this is a general download map, not of a specific work, but of works across a portion of Academic Works. Meg would be able to say which portion we're looking at. I actually don't know, I admit. So right, you wouldn't be able to see this in your author dashboard. You would see a similar map just about the reach of your individual works. But this map really shows both the local and the global power of open access and open access to CUNY authored works. Next slide. So that is the end of the presentation. We definitely have some time for some conversation or questions and answers. Our contact information is on the slide, but we can also put it in the chat. I encourage folks, so for those of you at ASRC, Mason Brown is your primary library contact, but I am your primary CUNY Academic Works contact. So you're welcome to reach out to me directly. And then Meg works with those of us who work with CUNY Academic Works across the university. So Meg is always there to help us out as well, but I would be your first point of contact with questions.
Thank you both so much. That was a great presentation. We learned a lot. And we are just grateful to have you to share this resource with us that I was so pleased to learn about, how fortunate we were at CUNY to have this available to all of us. There are definitely some questions in the chat. So if we want to scroll through, I'll start at the top. Let me see. Looks like you answered that one. Okay, so Sean, do you want to ask Jill and Meg or
Sure, no, sure. I was just curious, in terms of institutional affiliations, obviously at the Graduate Center, our faculty often have multiple CUNY affiliations. So is there a way to indicate those multiple affiliations when they're?
Yes, it's a really important question and one that is central to the design of Academic Works. The solution is perhaps inelegant, but there is a solution, which is when you are submitting to CUNY Academic Works, after you've entered the names of the authors, you will be asked to add any affiliations that exist at CUNY. And so if you are affiliated at the Graduate Center and City College or LaGuardia Community College, whatever your multiple affiliations may be, you can just click each of those institutions. If you would like, you can go down to the department level, but just within the institutions. And then once a month we have we run some reports and have some things processed on the back end to make sure that you can submit to one place and it will appear across multiple areas. So, so submit wherever you would like, as long as you are affiliated with that institution, and just make sure to designate your other affiliations at the moment of submission.
Thanks.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Jill, you had mentioned the importance of including an abstract and including an abstract when you upload your article or submission. I was wondering if there might be an opportunity for Academic Works to allow for a lay audience abstract as we think about access to this information, and a lot of the work that we do, that I do with Sean over at the Illumination Space Hub, is really to communicate science in a way that will reach audiences where they are. So I think it's wonderful that you have feedback from high school students and advocates in the community. But if there is some jargon that perhaps is included in the abstract that people aren't able to find, might this be something that you would think about for future as you continue to build out Academic Works in a way that truly provides open access to everybody?
Meg, can I nominate you to take this question? Because I think you have the best 30,000-foot view to answer.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, it's a great question, right? I mean, because it is that thing of like transforming and translating publicly accessible research into publicly accessible language, and jargon can often serve as a barrier to that. In terms of inclusion of an abstract, we do recommend, for the purposes of the crawlers, that at this time the abstract field maps to the abstract that is printed on the paper itself. And I should mention that the platform that we work with has a direct contact at Google Scholar. And so this is one of the reasons why we're able to gain a little bit of insight into how to optimize the work. But that we do have a comments field where more descriptive information can be included. The other thing that I would encourage is that, because one of the things that we, do time available is, we may provide a description of our work on our personal website, or we may send it to our department chair or a communications office, right? And one of the things that I could see in a lot of at a lot of different schools all over, inside and outside of CUNY, is that often there will be like a press release about a new piece of research, and I can read the publicly accessible language, right? But I don't actually have access to the research itself to go and dig deeper. And so my recommendation is that wherever you are communicating your research and through these channels that are where you can perhaps communicate it in a public facing way, that you submit it to Academic Works in advance and provide that link when communicating it. That will also ensure that when you receive your monthly readership reports, when you log into the author dashboard, that you have all of the information about downloads. I should say we remove all bot traffic. So 60% of traffic to a site like academia.edu is actually going to be bots. For Academic Works, we remove all of that bot traffic. So, you know, there's a person behind each one of those. And getting downloads in the repository doesn't take away from downloads you may receive elsewhere, because different users are going to find the content in different places.
Thanks, Meg. That was helpful. Let's see. So Mark had put in the chat. Mark, did you have a question for Meg and Jill or a comment?
I just wanted to make a comment, actually, that that the reason that journals stay in business is because they do get their journals cited, and so that's why using Zotero and sharing your Zotero is a really good app so that you can people your students and other collaborators can share this application to help. It makes it easier to help use references rather than type in mistakes of references. You know, you can, Zotero is a way you share all of the references that you've put into journals. I just wanted to make this comment.
Yeah, it's a really good comment. I love Zotero. For those that are unfamiliar with Zotero, it is an open source citation manager that was developed at George Mason University. So it works much like, I think, even better than other citation managers like RefWorks or EndNote. You know, especially because you can use it as you go across different affiliations. I was once at a university when they got rid of their RefWorks account and people had to transport entire books. And so Zotero is really valuable for making sure that all of your citations are accurate in your published works. And Mason put a really important comment in the chat that, you know, Mason is always available to help folks with Zotero questions that come up and questions about citation management tools more broadly.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that comment because it is something that is like globally made through a lot of institutions, and not just academia, but in companies, and everybody can use Zotero and write papers.
Yep. I've even used it in my Wikipedia work.
And one of the things I was going to add about it, it's true for all of the different citation management software tools, but certainly true in Zotero. And I'm a big advocate for Zotero as well. I love it. It's what I use in my research. But for those of you who are writing articles that you may submit to one journal, which may accept it or may not, if you then have to submit it to a second journal or possibly a third journal for consideration, lots of different journals have different required styles in terms of what they want their references and bibliographies to look like. And one of the reasons Zotero is so nice is because, like, with a click of basically 2 buttons, you can say, switch this paper so that everything that I have cited, which is currently in, say, APA style, is going to get switched over into the style that's required by this journal, or the style that's required by that journal, as a huge knowledge base of the different styles required by different journals. So yes, we are definitely Zotero cheerleaders as well. Ooh, great question in the chat. Was that, oh, I don't want to skip ahead if there were any others that you had stored up, Josephine.
No, I was going to say I wanted to be mindful of the time, so this would be our last question if that was okay for everybody. Go ahead, Jill. Oh, so it was a noob asking if you can upload an article published in, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Elsevier?
Yes,
Okay.
Elsevier. Yep.
Elsevier.
So Elsevier is one of the high profit commercial publishers. They are one of the publishers that has sent big takedown notices to academia.edu. They control what happens with their work, or the work that they have gained the copyright to through author agreements. They are quite active in enforcing their copyright. However, the Elsevier journals, I think it's true as a blanket statement, allow authors to upload, for the most part, not the final formatted PDF version, like the published PDF version of the article, but I believe with most Elsevier journals, what they say is that you can upload the peer-reviewed manuscript version of your article. So this would not be the article as you initially submitted it, though typically they say, yes, you can upload that too if you want. But articles often go through quite a bit of change between submission and publication. So a lot of valuable feedback comes in through peer review. Meaningful changes tend to get made, and then the journal accepts it. So most Elsevier journals say yes, that post-refereed version of the manuscript. So again, not the final pretty formatted version, but the final manuscript version can be shared in repositories. And different journals have different policies about what's called an embargo. So Elsevier and other journals will say, okay, you can share it, but give us a head start. And so that some journals say, give us a head start of 6 months, or some journals say, give us a head start of a year. And so they say you can put it online, but not for some period of time. And typically in your interactions with the journal, what they have you sign or with the information they link you to in the submission process makes clear what their expectations and policies are regarding that. Meg, do you want to build on that answer at all?
Yeah, that was a really good answer. The only thing I will add is that if you have any questions about it, both Jill and I can work with you either to read your contract. We are not lawyers and cannot provide legal advice, but we look at these contracts a lot. Yeah. And so we can work with you to identify the default sharing policies for your journal. We can advocate for you on your behalf with the journal, but also that Academic Works is set up to support an embargo period of any time. So if your publisher requires that it is dark for 6 months after publication, you can add that at the time of submission and really set it and forget it. Once the 6 months have expired, it will automatically be made available online. So you can submit it and we will support you to share it.
Yes, yes. You don't have to keep track of
everyone.
it on your own calendar, right?
Thank you both. We are grateful for this session. I thought it was super helpful for everybody who was able to attend today. I did want to let you know that you will be receiving a short survey from me about the event in general and about the contents, and also let you know that our December event is scheduled for Friday, December 2nd, and we're excited to be having a conversation with Malcolm Gladwell about the role of public higher ed in science communication and STEM communication. So I put the registration link in the chat. So please register for that event. We're excited for it. And we are really, really grateful to Meg and Jill for joining us today. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you and are excited for the partnership.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. It's beautiful out there. Enjoy the sun.